Welcome back to the Lore of Nikke Goddess of Victory. This is part 8 in a series designed to cater to both veterans and newcomers alike. We'll be blazing through the game's story, while stopping at the end of each video to discuss specific plot points and spoilers. If you enjoy this content, please consider signing up as a channel member through YouTube or Patreon. Even the smallest monthly pledge helps more than you know. The previous episode covered Scarlet's backstory, her time in Melee Squad before joining the Goddesses. Now it's time for Red Ash, our first chronological intro to the Goddess Squad, taking place just 4 years after the initial Rapture invasion. Before we get started, I want to follow up on a previous video. While Mary's story mainly concerns her trying to make amends for her past misdeeds, her summer variant, Bay Goddess, features a Bond story that firmly lands her on the naughty list. During their joint mission on the beach, the commander gets poisoned, and Mary tends to him while administering an antidote. She admits he's more than just a patient to her, and wants to show it when he's recovered. The following morning, the commander wakes up feeling better than ever, though the previous night's injection has given him a raging hard-on. Mary rides the commander and is Commander Junior, rendering him fatigued for a completely different reason. So far, our naughty list consists of the following Nikkes: Mihara, Yulha, Emma, Maxwell, Delta, Brid, Milk, Volume, and Mary. There are plenty more, but if I accidentally cover one without adding them, just let me know and I'll fix that in a jiffy. Today's event tells the story of Red Hood, a Nikke who fought during the first Rapture invasion. As a human, she was a delinquent living out of a rustic village. She loved her hometown and country music. At least, that's how she described the one particular album she'd play on repeat. Rather than work or school, she'd ditch that to goof off with her friends. Ultimately, though, she was killed in some kind of accident and was turned into a Nikke without formally applying to be one. Her reckless nature and fiery attitude made her especially compatible, resulting in some incredible abilities. This made her an ideal candidate for one of the first-generation Grimm's models, specialized Nikkes built with exponentially more funding. In their case, it was definitely quality over quantity. Technically speaking, Liliweiss was the first unique Nikke model, the prototype for the Grimm series. However, some considered her an anomaly rather than a true Nikke as we know them today. Liliweiss, also nicknamed Lily or Lilith, was considered the strongest Nikke, though making her so came at the cost of her life expectancy. Nikkes don't normally have a time limit, but Lilith had every reason to be as efficient as possible, for her own sake and humanity's. Some unvoiced side stories reveal how Lilith was the prototype for the Grimm series, Model Zero, as it were. The members of her squad occupied the second in the series onwards, implying there was an unnamed Grimm's Nikke who was made directly after Lilith. Turns out, Grimm's series number 1 died in the manufacturing stage from physical strain. To mourn her fellow comrade, Liliweiss would occasionally visit a field of flowers where they first spoke. For a time, her sorrow haunted her, but then her commander stepped in and promised they would fight as a team to prevent future losses. Red Hood, as well as the other Grimm's models, were assigned to the Goddess Squad. As the name suggests, they were meant to bring hope to the masses during a time when annihilation seemed inevitable. The Goddesses were able to establish a foothold in the war, turning the tides ever so slightly in humanity's favor. Normally, one wouldn't think dedicated squads of foot soldiers would be so important, but more traditional methods weren't exactly reliable. As I said back in Part 1, humanity tried to implement weapons of mass destruction, but that backfired when an especially nasty rapture, Gluttony, devoured an entire missile and regurgitated it out as a blast of energy, decimating the entire launch site. Then another type of rapture, Stormbringer, made aerial combat unreliable. Ever since, Nikkes were deemed the future of combat. Let's go ahead and introduce these charismatic heroes. As I just said, Red Hood was originally born in a quaint village near a cornfield. One of her prized possessions, an old cassette player, was gifted to her by a friend. Aside from her interest in retro country tunes, she was also an open pervert who read adult books and magazines, trying to get her squad mates to share in the hobby. Red Hood happened to be a slob, failing to take proper care of her rifle, Wolfsbane. She never considered it a big deal until Snow White embarrassed her by complaining in front of the others. To be fair, it was really bad, with food stains, gunk, and even mushrooms growing from the damn thing. While rough around the edges, Red came in clutch when it counted, kicking Rapture ass on the battlefield. She contributed greatly to the team, but never really felt worthy of her squad, given her humble origins. I'd say she more than made up for it with her playful, optimistic attitude. It certainly came in handy when, during the early stages of the invasion, she incurred corruption. At that time, corruption wasn't nearly as well researched as it is today. Some of the earliest cases were benign, doing little more than temporarily paralyzing a Nikke. As years passed, however, corrupted Nikkes became more violent and unpredictable. Their symptoms ranged from senselessly repeating random phrases to Nikkes openly firing on their teammates, mistaking them for raptures. None of them escalated to the level of a heretic, but they were still dangerous. Think of it like a mind switch that would only get worse and worse over time. Despite her own corruption, Red Hood had the mental fortitude to stave off its growth with her nymph. This let her keep fighting for humanity, even though she knew it would be her inevitable downfall. She jokes about her mortality, much to her friends' dismay. The friend displeased by this the most was Snow White. She was the squad's innocent, yet exceptionally talented weaponsmith. Out of her own genuine interest, she would handle crafting, repairing, and improving her teammates' weapons, including her own 7 dwarves. While the goddesses could get quite rowdy, Snow could often be found complaining about them to Liliweiss. She was their voice of reason, providing equipment that would keep them alive. Lilith, however, fought with her bare hands, much to Snow's admiration. It was always Snow White's dream to create a weapon for her role model, given that Lilith was so strong she would actually break most weapons trying to use them normally. When not hunkered down in the lab or face first in a computer, Snow could be found gorging on delicious cafeteria food. She would even sneak instant noodles whenever she had the chance. When bored, she would even program her own video games, calling them simulations. Overall, Snow White considered the goddess squad her family, which I guess would make her the youngest sibling. She and Red Hood had an especially close bond, even though she was always on the receiving end of Red's teasing. The most compassionate member of Goddess is Rapunzel. Fittingly, she was a priestess in the church before becoming a Nikke. Very little is discussed about religion in this story, but in the early days, there used to be an organization called the VTC, which was run by the Catholic Church. Mind you, this church may not actually be Catholicism, but their political structure functioned much the same, with Rapunzel once being a candidate for papacy. Even though she was born and raised for that purpose, that future was robbed from her the moment she became a Nikke. It's implied that this wasn't by choice, though the exact details aren't certain. Still, being a Nikke never halted her desire to save people. She fought for the Goddess Squad while keeping her connections to the VTC. Ultimately, VTC was a humanitarian organization specializing in medical research, though there was certainly overlap with Nikke healthcare too. This put Rapunzel on the front lines as corruption symptoms evolved. Hoping to find a cure, she worked with her former priestess Red Shoes and head researcher Ave. It was a noble effort destined for failure. She felt responsible for her inability to cure Red Hood's corruption, though nobody else blamed her. In fact, Red was more concerned about Rapunzel's well-being. After all, the potential popess had lived for everyone's sake but her own. She never acted on her own interests. Red, however, could sense Rapunzel's interest in her stash of dirty magazines and movies. In the company of others, Rapunzel would decry such indecent material, but it was clear she was merely suppressing a growing curiosity. Thus, Red Hood would continue to provoke her, giving the term corruption a different meaning. In battle, Rapunzel played a supporting role, with the ability to heal her allies and even protect them with a force field. Technically, this was a process of regenerating a Nikke's damaged goddessium flesh. Sensors in her hair allowed her to jam the signal of nearby raptures. Rapunzel used this to bypass raptures without having to fight them. It also proved handy for performing burial rites, as she could leave some of her hair with the deceased to prevent raptures from desecrating their graveside, for a time anyway. You'd think she, of all Nikkes, would make the commander's naughty list. But no, they never take things that far, though she does fantasize about it. Dorothy, the only goddess whom we've yet to meet in the main story, was the daughter of a wealthy politician. She was spoiled, arrogant, and prideful. She enjoyed her peaceful days prior to the Rapture invasion, knowing that since those days would never return, she could at least exact revenge on the Raptures for ruining them. Despite lacking combat experience, Dorothy quickly proved herself capable of being one of the legendary goddesses. Insisting on maintaining proper posture, Dorothy would employ keen strategy to avoid having to dirty her clothes or fight barehanded. In that regard, she was the exact opposite of Scarlet, whom she considered a brute for charging straight into rapture colonies. No, Dorothy was the epitome of elegance, often carrying around an umbrella, parasol. She hated being called snotty, but if the shoe fits… All jokes aside, Dorothy took her duty as a goddess seriously. Even to this day, she has a hard time conveying her true feelings. She cares for her allies, but is too stubborn to admit it. She and Scarlet would eventually get along over their shared enjoyment of tea. That didn't stop them from bickering, though. Scarlet, whom we're already familiar with, joined on as the only member of Goddess who wasn't originally a Grimm's model. More specifically, she was recruited by Liliweiss after the Goddess Squad came upon the aftermath of Scarlet's duel with Rose. This first encounter wasn't pleasant, and though Scarlet had no intention of joining, she agreed to do so if anyone among the goddesses could best her in a duel. Lilith, being the resident one-punch woman, easily had her way. In fact, they dueled twice at Scarlet's insistence, which only resulted in her being uppercut so hard she got lodged in the ceiling. Undeterred, Scarlet went on to find her place in the squad's ranks by challenging each of them. Rather than conventional sparring, they wind up competing in various trials, such as who can pray/meditate the longest, or arrange weapons the fastest. Red Hood, juvenile as ever, insisted on a game of hide-and-seek with sniper rifles. Scarlet's only victory came from beating Dorothy at arm wrestling. Despite mostly losing, these competitions helped Scarlet and her new squad admire each other's abilities. Along with her sister's blade, she carries the weight of her former squad mates, fighting for Goddess on their behalf. The Goddess Squad was led by its commander, whom you may recognize as Andersen from the main story. To this day, they've never confirmed it officially, but there are far too many hints to say otherwise. In the present, he does all he can to hide his prior work, which had him hailed as the legendary commander. I'll keep calling him Andersen for my sanity. He was quite the hotshot in his heyday, a rebel whose attitude fit well with his squad. Andersen gathered everyone for a briefing and explained how a full frontal assault on the Raptures would be impossible. However, if they could just sever the chain of command, humanity would have a chance. Specifically, the Raptures followed the order of their queen, who at the same time produced more Raptures. Shortly after the Raptures invaded, their very first target was an orbital lift leading to space. They took it over, along with the space station connected to it. Many thought the Rapture Queen was still up there, making her children and sending them down via the lift. Thus, the goddesses were tasked with storming the lift and killing the queen, along with a force of mass-produced Nikkes. Their key to this mission would be Cinderella, the strongest in a second generation of Grimm's models. She was to clear a path for the goddesses to reach the lift. Red Hood seemed eager to make this her final mission. Even though she'd held onto her sanity in the face of corruption, her voice was changing, and her eyes turned redder than her hair. Red Hood could sense her time coming to an end. After this mission, she would retire from the military and spend her final days at her hometown. Things had already gotten bad enough that she forgot what her own parents looked like. Despite how severe her situation was, Red Hood had no actual clue when she would die, nor could she guarantee she would die before losing her mind. Hell, she might become the first Nikke to stave off corruption entirely. In the face of uncertainty, she chose to joke about it, making Snow White angry. When Red Hood tried to give Snow her favorite cassette player, the gift was rejected as some kind of dying memento. Snow wanted Red to stay with her till the end, but that meant risking their reputation as a beacon of hope. That, and if Red Hood lost her mind, she would need one of her allies to put her down. Of them, Snow White certainly couldn't bring herself to pull the trigger. The two shelved this matter, as it was time to embark on their greatest mission. Unfortunately, Elysion's third Nikke research lab, where Cinderella was, had been overrun with raptures. It was too dangerous to visit on foot, so the goddesses dropped in from the sky, leaping from their Avengers-style airship. On the way down, Snow White's parachute got struck by anti-air fire, forcing her to make a premature landing. Red Hood jumped down after her without a parachute, arriving just in time for a hardcore rescue. Despite their efforts, the operation came to a halt. Cinderella went missing, and the lab didn't appear to have any survivors. Instead, Andersen found a horrifying fusion of Nikke and rapture parts. Were the raptures really responsible for this? Back at base, Red Hood suffered a severe migraine brought on by her corruption. Unable to bear seeing her suffer, Snow White ran out of the room. How could Red Hood remain on the team if even this could scare Snow off? Andersen received orders from the UFH to eliminate Red Hood before she got any worse. Thankfully, he followed his rebellious spirit and ignored those orders. Continuing to part with her friends through gifts, Red Hood handed Rapunzel the magazine Blinding Passions Volume 1, under the false pretense that it was a benign book about humans and their lives. Tricked into reading smut yet again, Rapunzel protested, yet couldn't look away. This gesture wound up being the straw that broke the camel toe's back. Her perverse wiles would only grow from here, and that's a good thing. Poor girl had been living a life dictated for her. Indulging in erotica was the one thing she seemed to embrace of her own will. Rather than look for Cinderella, the squad's mission changed to attacking the lift without her. Once again, the goddesses dropped in from above, fighting even as they descended. On land, Lilith tore through the strongest raptures with ease. She made this hellish onslaught look tame and gentle. Even without as much support, the goddesses made their way to the lift, only to encounter their greatest foe. Turns out, raptures weren't responsible for destroying Elysion's lab. They only followed after the culprit attacked first. Cinderella didn't just escape. She was corrupted right on the eve of their joint operation. She now fought humanity as the very first heretic, Anachiro. Her weapon, glass slippers, rained down a bombardment of beams on the goddesses. They tried to endure, but ultimately abandoned their assault. Their failure ruined all hope of reclaiming the surface, prompting humanity to go take shelter in the Ark. The goddess squad would then be assigned to defend the Ark while people evacuated. Red Hood, however, decided this was the end for her career. Even though they lost, that was supposed to be her final mission. Sure, she'd like to stick around and fight, but she'd rather go home than force any of her friends to execute her. In tears, Snow White tried to stop this, insisting she could fire without hesitation if it meant having more time together. Her false bravado was clear as day, and when Red Hood turned to walk away, her sadness turned to anger. It was far from a pleasant farewell. With Red Hood gone, Rapunzel lamented being unable to cure her corruption. Dorothy regretted not offering to kill her sooner, as that would be preferable to Red Hood suffering all on her own. Understandably, Snow White held a grudge, assuming Red Hood had already died. On the contrary, the forlorn Nikke was homeward bound when the corruption made her pass out for 2 whole months. After coming to, she decided to hitchhike to her destination instead. Her patience paid off when a military officer named Oswald stopped by in an armored truck. He was en route to the Ark, and while Red Hood had no need to go there, her destination was on the way. Meanwhile, Anachiro continued to devastate the battlefield, while suspiciously choosing to keep one person alive wherever she appeared. Should the goddess squad encounter her again, they planned to have Lilith take her one-on-one. That would be a good option, if only Lilith weren't reaching her limit. Regarding her current condition, she's been able to bluff her way past everyone but Andersen, who supported her when they were alone. On the road, Red Hood handed Oswald her termination gun, asking him to kill her if she lost her mind. He was under the impression she had died 2 months back, but was glad to finally meet one of the goddesses in person. He was quite the simp, bragging about their achievements, while wondering why she wasn't with them. Oswald could tell, at the very least, that Red Hood was at the end of her rope, barely able to hold her own rifle anymore. Despite this, she insisted on pulling over to save some civilians from a rapture attack. Instead of her gun, Red Hood slayed the raptures with her fists, impressing her onlookers. This took a lot out of her, but even though she was suffering and mentally unstable, she forced a smile and staved off corruption with sheer willpower. These humans were headed for the Ark and were lucky enough to have tickets granting them admission. I can only imagine how many people were denied entry through this system. Anyway, among the party was a little girl, Freesia, who had recently lost her parents to some kind of illness. She was sad, of course, but felt good about being able to speak with them a lot before they passed. It was her dream to become a Nikke, and meeting Red Hood made that ambition all the more important. To make room for these people on Oswald's truck, Red chose to disembark here. As a parting gift, Oswald returned her cassette player, having fixed it up. Snow White locked herself away, dedicating every second to making weapons so that she never had to lose anyone ever again. Lilith tried to suggest she instead learn to part with others on a positive note. After all, even this stoic prototype wouldn't last forever. The Goddess Squad had been busy fending off multiple rapture attacks on the Ark's entrance. Interrupting this mission was an order from the newly found central government, requesting Andersen and Lily to report in person. For the next couple of days, they would entrust command to Dorothy. Somehow, the Raptures acted as though they saw this coming, choosing to concentrate their forces as soon as Lilith was away. The goddesses sure could use some help about now. Red Hood was suffering all alone in absolute agony. Not even her music could calm her down. She endured the pain, while reminiscing of all the good times she had with her squad. This made her realize how much she regretted leaving them on such a bad note. Just like Freesia and her parents, Red Hood wanted to give the Goddess Squad a proper farewell. Her frustration granted her a second wind of sorts, and she roused her body to go meet them. The unexpected surge in raptures left Dorothy and her squad fighting on limited supplies. Eventually, though, they could hear the sound of Red Hood's rifle. She was really pushing herself this time, but that extra push went a long way. Unfortunately, their brief reunion was interrupted by Anachiro. At the same time, there couldn't have been a better time for Red Hood to show up. Together, they isolated Anachiro's glass slippers, distancing the Heretic from her weapon. Red Hood pinned Anachiro to the wall before unloading a magazine into her gut. Through an anime cutscene, the Goddesses of Victory took down mankind's greatest foe. With that done, Red Hood really did need to leave. She still wanted to visit her hometown before dying. This time, however, she was able to reconcile with her squad mates first. Snow White endured to put on a tearful smile. It may have seemed pointless, but she vowed to perfect the weapon she'd been building for Red Hood. Surely someone would find it useful one day. Hint, hint. Once again, Red Hood embarked on the journey home, but stopped to sleep in an abandoned house. She must have downed a bit too much NyQuil, because she woke up a whopping 30 years later. The house was extra tattered, and nature began to reclaim much of the war-torn landscape. The sound of gunfire led her toward a profound encounter with some mass-produced Nikke going by the name Rapi? Say what? We'll find more about that later. For now, let's take a step back and elaborate on the fallout of the goddesses' fight with Anachiro. Overzone follows shortly after their victory, but there's one more detail that's easy to miss. Whatever happened to Andersen and Lilith? The secret message side story had Andersen declare their visit to the Ark had taken a turn for the worst. While he declared they'd be back soon enough, the recording ended with him running off screen screaming out to Lilith. We still don't know what exactly caused his fearful reaction, but a second recording indicates Liliweiss never intended to return alive. She had recorded her own final will and testament, which we get to hear at the start of Overzone. After making the recording, she and Andersen left on their journey to the Ark, with both of them promising to each other to come back alive. Clearly, this didn't work out the way they wanted. To end this section on a brighter note, the side story Nonsense Red takes us back to the Goddess Squad's good old days. It starts in the modern day with Rapunzel digging around the commander's room in the outpost, looking for his spank bank. In the process, she bumps into a jukebox, causing it to play one of Red Hood's favorite songs. This reminds her of a time before the Red Ash event. Back then, a small victory party was being held in the goddess's honor, and Lilith encouraged the squad to dress appropriately. Red Hood, being a country bumpkin, had no experience with formal wear. Afraid of embarrassing herself at the party, she actually overdressed for the occasion, emerging in a super sexy dress and cardigan, while her allies just wore whatever they always did. They teased Red Hood for taking this so seriously, forcing her to spend the party binging glasses of wine. Thus, it actually came as a relief when raptures attacked. The embarrassed Nikke took this chance to ditch the party and fight. Her carnage ruined the outfit, which she never planned to wear ever again anyway. The other goddesses thought it was a shame, despite their teasing. The rest of the night was spent with the venue all to themselves, and Red Hood eased her tension with some of her favorite songs, which just so happened to be playing on the commander's jukebox. Let us end things on this high note, as the next event is quite the downer.
Hey guys, Dai-chan here, which means it's time for some more spoilers. Feel free to skip out now, though I hope you come back when all is said and done. This section is meant to reinforce and recontextualize how these events play into the larger narrative as a whole. For example, let's look at the destruction of Elysion's lab. Andersen found this abomination hybrid of Nikke and rapture parts. I feel confident that this was the work of Red Shoes, whom we won't see again until much later. In addition to improving the Rapture's corruption code, she was likely experimenting on how to force Nikke's into the Rapture army. In other words, she was trying to create the very first Heretic. It wouldn't be surprising to learn she was taking more than one approach at the same time. Anachiro just happened to succeed first. Red Ash conveys how the corruption code was slowly but surely evolving, with more detrimental symptoms. It's scary to think that Red Shoes was testing these improved variants in live combat. The big giveaway comes during Rapunzel's Bond story, where it's revealed one of the mass-produced Nikkes got corrupted without being wounded in combat. It was an inside job, just like with Marion. That last part regarding Lilith's death is also quite haunting. What happened at the Ark to cause her demise? Just what did Andersen see to make him cry out? The only clue we get comes much later during the Old Tales event, where we see a single shot of Liliweiss injured on the ground, looking up toward the sky. As nice as this is, it's still really vague. Obviously, Andersen survived, but I think that same incident is why he insists on hiding his identity. My question is, who is he trying to hide from? Regardless, his injuries have him unable to leave the Ark, as it's the only thing powering his life support. If you pay attention carefully, he shows signs of remembering his time with the Goddess Squad. Surely he remembers Snow White, as I assume the commander used her name directly. Does he want to meet with her again? Is it just that he can't without blowing his cover? Rapunzel expresses how she wants to reunite with him, but doesn't even know if he's alive or not. While she could go to the Ark and search for him, that goes against what she's trying to accomplish now. I really hope they all meet up one day. At the time of this video, it hasn't happened yet. Andersen's also weary of heretics from his encounter with Anachiro. He has a hard time believing it when we tell him we've made Cinderella into an ally. A conversation between the two of them would be interesting. When Snow White talks about making a weapon for Red Hood, the actual design isn't brought up until much later. There's a scene in the main story where it flashes back to Red Ash's time, and Red suggests making a weapon equipped with a massive drill. In the end, a version of Snow's weapon 7 Dwarves is given that feature, and it ultimately makes its way to Rapi. I just found it odd that the drill wasn't actually mentioned in Red Ash like I thought it was. It's much more relevant to the event Footstep, Walk, Run, which we'll get to much later in this series. Our next exciting episode will cover the other goddesses as they protect the Ark during its construction. I say it's a downer, but the beauty of this story is that it pairs tragedy with sincere hope, and it really does pay off in the end. Be sure to check out the full playlist on my channel page and after the credits. You won't want to miss a single thing. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Mystic Samurai 1983, Otaku Mom, Freebrick, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Lunar Works, Link Pendrago, Observer Bellis, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Pro Calum, Saul Soto, Major, Matal Mataru, Winter's Edge, Sneer Cachette, Sunbro Torian, Foxbox, Alzinga Falgon, Caitlin P, Sith Lord 906, Vladimir Rovna, The Taz 96, Kengo X77, and Alistair Bernadotte. Thank you all so much.